All right, so what kind of switch? Should we fill up our rack over here? So, switch number 1. We have a fixed port switch. This is the type of switch you probably bought when you did hands-on number, what did we just do, 4? Yes, hands-on number 4. We did hands-on number 4. So for example, you might have bought a 48 port switch, and it might have had a +2 optical, and we talked about that last time. But what that means is in my rack, I'm going to have one switch, and they always group these. Usually these are by 12s. Anyway, so it's just one rack mounted switch. I don't know why I'm drawing this whole thing, sorry, it's very lovely though. So this would be a fixed port switch. We might be able to uplink, or we would have to uplink if we wanted more ports than just the 48. Okay, and so just like last time when you guys bought this, you bought the 48 port switch, and we had to buy something like, what, 5 that went in the basement. It ended up being a lot, and we had to uplink all of them into that core switch. Okay, so that's a fixed port switch. These are normally 1 unit tall. 1 unit is that space here with the 2 screws in it. Okay, so that's 1 rack unit tall. 1 unit. Okay, that is, how tall is that? 1.75 inches. All right, so that's a fixed port switch, so that's type number 1. Type number 2 is a stackable switch. Okay, this is each individual switch is fixed port. All right, so it's going to look the same as these other ones, and I'll just draw another one here. So a stackable switch from the front is going to look the same. It's going to have its rack mounting screws, and it's going to have its ports. I'm just going to draw ports with dots now, sorry. So I don't have time to draw the pretty squares. All right, so that's a stackable switch. Nice 3D effect there. The advantage here is there is a high-speed interconnect. Usually this is at the rear. Okay, so if we did a back view of this, there's going to be 2, and these ports look like either an HDMI port or a DVI port. So a lot of holes in it. Okay, and what this means is if I have 2 of these switches together, I take a plug that goes, let's use this nice red color. I'm going to take a plug and plug it from the input of one to the output of another. So this is high-speed interconnect, and we better note that. It is high speed. The interconnect actually extends the switching fabric. So now it becomes 2 switches that share a switching fabric. All right? So before we would have, remember our switching fabric looked like this and we had it going down? All right? Remember we talked about non-blocking and all of that business, right? So with a single switch, you get a switching fabric like this. If they're stackable, you would have like 2 separate switching fabrics. If they're not stackable, 2 separate switching fabrics when you uplink them. But if they are stackable, that switching fabric just extends it. So you end up with a larger fabric. Okay? So the fabric ends up going across the 2 switches. You guys following that? At least the guys in front of me. It's really sad to see, I don't know what room that is, in the upper right corner. There's usually a guy sitting there with a laptop, but that is dark today. It's very sad. I'm sure he'll watch this online, like the other 6 people that are supposed to be in here face to face. The roads aren't that bad now, are they? It's like slush, isn't it? Unflavored Slurpee, that's a nice way to put it. All right, so that's stack. Oh, and the last thing about stacking, you usually get 4 in a stack. That's just sort of the normal way they do it. So with 4 switches, you can extend the switching fabric. You know, you can end up with a pretty big switching fabric because you can get, 48 port stackable switches, and that's, pretty big switching fabric. Hope you can get your brain around that one. But they don't usually go above 4 because the high-speed interconnect just isn't going to make it. So a stackable switch is going to cost you a little more, but it lets you expand. And we'll put incrementally. So I can expand sort of slowly with a stackable switch. If I start with 48 here, with a stackable, I can just interconnect them and it just makes a bigger switch. If I started with 48 up here, I have to uplink them together, and now I have a bottleneck, okay? Should we note that up here? So if I was uplinking, I would be linking up here, and then I would be sad, so I'll put a frowny face. The frowny face has to have a nose. Shall I put an eyebrows above him? So uplinking is not really that sad, but it's not as happy as stackable switches, so we get 4 in a stack. I just realized I can only write 2 points on here, so my lovely diagram I'm going to have to borrow from. All right, next kind of switch. Switch type number 3 is called modular. What a modular switch is, it just has open bays on the front. Okay? If you have open bays, it's just like an open expansion port. And so this switch, sometimes they're nice and small, like 1 unit tall. They're still lovely and rack mounted, but they have just a blank hole. There might be 2 blank holes. Okay? And the modules they can have different kinds and speeds of ports. So this is fun. I can put a module in here. Let's make this one blue. Let's see how well blue shows up. And I can have one module on one side be nice 100 base T, and let's say I can put, however many that is, 12 100 base T ports on one side of this. Ooh, that hardly shows up, huh? On the other side, I might want gigabit speed, and so I would only have a few gigabit ports. You follow me there? But these are really flexible, right? I could plug in a whole bunch of unshielded twisted pair 100 base T ports. Over here I put gigabase T ports. So I can mix and match. You can also mix and match unshielded twisted pair or fiber. Okay? So a module over here, I could buy a fiber module, and over here I could run unshielded twisted pair. Companies use these. A small modular switch. They will use these for branch offices. Or sometime, well, we'll just stick with branch offices. Or smaller, some sort of smaller place. Okay, I want some flexibility. I'll note that down. I like the flexibility of these. Okay, so we like the flexibility, but they are fairly small. That would be a modular switch. All right, switch type number 4 is what's called a chassis. And a chassis switch is really a huge, we'll just put huge, modular switch. Okay, so a huge modular switch. A chassis switch is going to be, and a lot of times these will take up half or more of a rack. They'll have their fasteners in here, and you have to put a few more screws in them. Get them all tight, because they are really heavy, and usually they will have fans, because they're so, I'll put the fans at the bottom, because there's just so much going on. Just a note up here on the modular switch, these modules share the same switching fabric, okay? So I'll note that here. We'll note that on the side. They share a switching. Basically, the modules plug into the back of the switch, and in the back of the switch is where the switching fabric is. So they have like an expansion slot connector on the back. You guys have seen like the back of a hard disk with the plugs and stuff. Okay, let's go back to the chassis. So here's my enormous chassis. Oops, and I put in my, what's that? So it's just basically going to be huge and open. And down the side of the chassis, it will normally also have screws down here, because I need to mount these modules as I plug them in. The modules work the same way on a chassis switch. So I'm going to fill in this whole section, and I can fill it in with a lot of slower ports, or I can fill it in and put in a few really fast ports. Okay, and so this is going to go down, and I might, if I'm doing this, for example, in a telecom closet on one floor, I would probably just fill it up with all these fast ports. Okay. But if I'm getting to the basement and this is a core switch, I might have just a lot of these high-speed modules. Okay, so if this is a course like in the equipment room, you know, I need these plugs for all of my, either my interconnects, my trunk lines running from upstairs, and then I need to connect out to my servers. So again, here with the chassis switch, we can mix and match speeds and the port types, and we're very excited by that. Okay, these take up a lot of space. They take up, oh, it just says several. They can take up a quarter or more of a rack. Need to look at that rack again. Yeah, can you show me in my face so they can see kind of how tall the rack is? Oh, there's the rack. So if I put my hand here, you guys can kind of see that. This rack is probably 6 feet tall, and a chassis switch would probably take up this whole section. This black stuff would all be one chassis, and that would be kind of a small chassis. So that's how big they are. That's a lovely shot. All right, thank you. So they're going to take up a lot of the rack. That's what a chassis is. You got any questions out here in the peanut gallery about switches? Buying a switch? Maybe. All right, we'll move on. We got stuff to do.